Good morning, everyone. Today is January 6th, 2020, and I'm opening the meeting for the Planning Matters Subcommittee. I see we have a full quorum. We also have our Director of Planning and Community Development, Connie, and we have a interested party, John, as well, Tina, who's also a regular here. All right, we have everyone signed in. We do have some minutes, but we've had a little issue opening some of them up. We will be taking care of it. I know some just saw the December 9th minutes for the first time. I don't know, any comments on them? Is it too premature, or we'll table them to the next meeting?
I was able to open them up, so I read them, and I found no problems with them.
And I printed them up for everybody, just to be sure, over here. Okay.
Only correction I see is under agenda. It says he mixed use, it should be the. It's a spelling.
Oh, good pickup, Ralph.
And that they look great.
Appreciate Paul's efforts.
I really do. Paul, hope you're watching. You've done a great job, and it saddens me that we will, because of the way the program is, that you've been able to help us, that it's, we can't move forward in the future with it, but hopefully it won't be the last of you. We'll see you again on doing this. The 16th, that I could not open up those minutes, and so I sent it back to Paul for comment to help to whatever he did to address this. He sent it to me as a Word file, and my feeling is that some of it was buried into his own computer, and that's why I couldn't access it remotely. So I think it just has to be downloaded and sent that way. I just could not. I tried every angle possible to open them. I could not. So.
I make a motion that we accept these minutes of December the 9th with one correction.
I have a motion made. Is it seconded?
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion? I'm hearing none. I'll call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Okay. And just, Joe Conley just showed up to join John.
He said you weren't coming.
Yeah,
I know Jenny's not coming.
all right,
Well, we would have waited for you.
all right. Marilyn graciously helped me out with a highlight of the highlights, so I will allow her at least to start the agenda with bullet points.
Good morning, everyone. I have emailed the committee and Connie the very draft suggestion for the height specifications for the mixed-use development, mixed-use village development. So, looking for comments, looking for edits, looking for yay or nay. I thought that would be the place to start. And this was with your request, Ralph, to revisit the heights.
Yep.
And there was concern with the, wherever this project, a project such as this would be located within the town, that we wanted to reflect the zone that was being replaced by the creation of this new district and reflect the surrounding community and not have, for lack of a better word, skyscrapers in the middle of a residential zone. And I know they're not skyscrapers. So, comments?
I thought it was pretty good. I'm glad you included recreational, residential with golf recreational, because you could have a property that might have a little bit, where the petitioner has a little overlap. Let's say they have their own residence, and they want to demolish that and tie it into a golf. So that there's some consistency over there between those two zones. So that was a good comment.
Quick comment, the way I approached this was I took every zone and started with the maximum height for that zone.
Mm-hmm.
And we have a different maximum height for residential versus commercial and business versus industrial and industrial garden park. And then I took the standard that is already in place, and that was created when Bluebird Estates was developed on Parker Street. And that is a 35-foot height maximum with up to 45 feet under special permit, pending the conditions of the project and the approval and opinion of the planning board. The only zone that is different is the industrial and the industrial garden park zones. I started with a maximum height of 45 feet, increasing to 50 feet with the structure being 400 feet from the property line, again, under special permit and planning board review and approval. And the rationale for that is that most of the buildings in the industrial garden park are of a moderate height. And the development that we may be dealing with on Chestnut Street sits directly next to a residential parcel and then a residential development with a maximum height of 35 feet. So I looked for a blend. That was my thinking, just to make it more, acceptable or visually accepting. So those are the comments I have to make.
So through the chair?
He was just a second, millisecond.
Let Connor go
That's
first.
fine. Go ahead, Connor.
I have a number, but I'll start with one and then Ralph can
Yeah.
go. Like the first part under 4.4 where it says like it shall reflect the surrounding zones where the district is to be created. What would constitute a surrounding zone? Because I know we're not talking about a specific project, but if we're taking that as an example, there's multiple surrounding zones. You have industrial garden park, you have residential A, across the street you have residential B, and then at the intersection you
I know
have
what he's saying, yeah.
business and commercial.
Maybe it's not clear, and maybe we need to massage the language, but the mixed-use village district, if created, would require a zone change. And it would be, and I'm gonna use Pease Road because there are a number of 40-acre parcels that are available right now for sale, at least that's my understanding. They are right in the middle of the residential zone, so if you were going to create a zone within an existing zone, it would be in the best interest of the town and the residents that all live there that the project complement what's already there. That's what I mean.
Oh, I understand the intention, I just worry about the conflicts of, there's not always gonna be a perfect scenario where all the surrounding parcels
Well,
are the
that's why
same
we have it
zone.
under special permit, and it's up to the opinion of the planning board. And when doing the project, at least that's how I see it.
That's what my thought was, is the planning board's gonna look and go, well, you know what, this is closer to the residential and all the
Right,
houses are
right.
right next to it, so maybe we should keep the heights towards this size, where like this project is pretty much industrial garden park. Those allow 50 foot, so we'll allow that.
And based on what we had initially, which was 50 feet, that wouldn't bode well in the middle of a residential zone, where the rest of the community is at 35, or the surrounding area is 35 feet height requirement.
Connor, do you have any edits you might suggest that might clarify it a little bit better, or?
And short of saying just the immediately adjacent parcels or something. Because I don't necessarily think it would be fair to take into consideration, oh, there's a residential one, but it's 2 miles down the road and it's not anywhere directly.
Would you rather
next
be
to ours.
abutting
Immediately surrounding zones?
or abutting zones?
So,
Connie?
through the chair, if I may, generally you give a distance, like within 200 feet of
Yeah.
the locust parcel. So you might want to be mindful of distance versus zone. I agree wholeheartedly with Connor because you have multi-roof lines in all different zones. So you want to measure from an
Right.
area. I'm looking for some language right now that might help clarify.
And what we can do is probably have the language in there, give a definition of surrounding zones within the draft.
Are you talking about this paragraph at the bottom where it says
It was the top.
adjacent?
Right at the top.
Right at the very top?
Right here.
Surrounding zones will reflect the surrounding zones where the district is to be created. And I put S in parentheses because it might be right in the middle of a residential zone, but it might be at the cusp of where the residential zone goes to the commercial zone, and that's where the planning board would come in with their wisdom on how best to massage that impact. It's all about impact.
I think if I'm understanding, I don't want to put words in your mouth, I think that his concern is the definition of surrounding zone. If a zone is 2 miles away, whereas Connie was talking a zone within 200 feet away from over there, what is?
Structure.
Structure, to reflect the surrounding zones. What are these surrounding zones vis-à-vis the locus, right?
Right, because you could then theoretically say,
Okay.
even if we didn't allow the
Well,
maximum.
the entire town is surrounding, to be honest with you. You know, we've got,
Right, so
I
I
see
think
what
he-
you're saying.
No, but it's
Yeah.
just if the minimums are different between each of A, B, C, and D, it could then be conceivable that someone could say, well, I don't care, the residential's 35 feet, but there's a surrounding one that's 45 feet, therefore I must be allowed 45 as a minimum, right? At which point 5 feet isn't much of a difference.
I guess maybe I'm not clear, because if the project zone that's going to be, the mixed-use village district that's going to be created is within what is currently the residential zone, those are the parameters that should kick in, because it's currently the residential zone, which is a 35 height maximum, with a additional 45 feet under special permit.
Excuse me, through the chair. This intent is primarily to protect the residential zones, not necessarily, I mean, the commercial zones, does it really matter?
It's to protect the town. It's to protect the whole town. We've already created this criteria in
Yeah.
each zone. And so that's, as I say, that's the intent, is to reflect
Well, of course,
where
to
the...
protect the town, but we want to protect the residential zones because that affects the property values more than the commercial zones.
I venture to differ with that, because my intent was to reflect what our zoning bylaws have addressed since the
Okay.
beginning. With each zone, there's criteria for each zone, and, just because it's a business zone, I wouldn't support a 6-story building in a business zone.
Okay.
And so, in fairness to people who, and in East Long Meadow, our zones abut one another. I mean,
Unfortunately,
you
yes.
sit right next to a business zone,
Unfortunately, yes.
and I want to protect your property.
Yes, good. Good. Can I get that in writing?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, that's
You
what we're
can
trying
get
to
that
do.
Yes.
Yes, and you're helping her put it in writing, so let's see what,
right. So I don't want to leave Connor.
No, we're not going to.
Okay.
I think, again, not putting words in your mouth, the focus is clarifying what surrounding zones mean and what criteria determines a surrounding zones. Is it immediately surrounding, or is it you're here and then there, like, over here is a residential zone? Do we use this piece, or is it just what the zone, right immediately next to the locus?
Yeah, I think
That's what he's asking.
How about the maximum height of structures within a mixed-use village district shall reflect the zone where the district is to be created?
Considering
Such height
immediately surrounding zones?
No,
No.
the zone where it's created.
So in other words, if you had an industrial garden park zone and you're switching it like this to mixed use, whatever the original for industrial garden park was, that's the height.
And, well, that based on, but,
Based on this,
right,
exactly.
right.
And now I would agree only because they can already build that size there. So if you're gonna build in, let's say, Fenway Park, or Fenway Golf, which is residential, the maximum height's 35, this reflects 35. If you're going into the business zone, and that's where this is predominantly gonna be, they allow 40 feet, you're allowing 40 feet. So you're not changing.
Yeah, my thinking is, and I don't mind if we lose the word surrounding and we just have it zone with the S and, as stated, because let's say you use Fenway Golf for the sake of discussion, and let's say the original Fisk House, which is probably residential, and the owners of it who take title, take Fenway Golf, take the Fisk House. So now the zone is not a zone, it is zones. They're building the project on a residential zone and a golf zone. So maybe having the pluralize of zones, because you could have an overlap of zones to constitute the
But the
40
height's still
acres.
35 feet on both.
Well, that's why I
Right.
applauded
Yeah.
Marilyn with the comment of keeping that consistent. But are there other examples? Let's
There
say
may be
Sid
other
Starks.
examples, yeah, exactly.
Let's say Bob Bolduc, for the sake of discussion, buys Sid's house and buys other properties, and now all of a sudden you've got a business zone, now also in with a residential zone to build a bigger project. Again, this is just for discussion's
Zone or
sake.
zones.
And just for the sake of discussion, we only have 2 golf recreational zones in town.
Yeah.
Right.
One of them is Elms,
Yep.
and the other is Franconia. And so it's all residential.
Okay,
So, through the chair, if I
yes,
may.
please, Connie.
Perhaps we could say the maximum height of structures within a mixed-use village district shall reflect the surrounding context where the district is to be created. When you think in terms of architecture, in terms of development, we use the word context, design context, because you're looking to your neighbor. And and then you can further clarify all residential zones, but just replace surrounding zones with context.
If those folks that use the bylaw know what we're talking about, I have no problem with that.
Don't, if I may, so don't forget, planning interprets this bylaw. I get the applications.
Right,
I look
right.
at the application. And
You know the definition of
I know,
context.
yeah. And in most cases, the folks who are coming before us have a little bit of knowledge in design and development. Some maybe need a little help, and then we talk about what we're looking for. But, excuse me, pardon me, for the most part, I think people who are doing a significant development have the expertise that lends itself to understanding what it is that the town is looking for. You know, just
I
to
have-
simplify.
I have no problem with changing that word.
All right,
So
so
would-
Liz, how would it be rephrased?
You're up. Commercial break. Yes.
The maximum height of structures within a mixed-use village district shall reflect the context,
Surrounding.
the surrounding context where the district is to be created.
How about, okay, I'm just kind of maybe, I don't think I'm overthinking this. How about the zone, and plural, and the surrounding context? Because I still don't want to lose sight of the zone that it's on over there.
I'm okay with that too,
Okay.
because that's what I
Zone
was trying to do.
And surrounding context?
Okay,
Good,
okay.
okay.
So with the context, you could actually, if,
So we get rid of the word plural zone, or just zone?
The surrounding,
Zone, the zone and surrounding
well, there,
context.
with the way East Long Meadow is created, we have zones that abut one another. Its
Exactly.
house is a perfect example.
Yeah.
He butts business, so I think that there has to be an S in there.
Okay, so the surrounding zone, the S, as an optional S, and surrounding context, no, the zone and surrounding context of the district to be created, a zone with the option of being pluralized depending on where the locus is. where the proposed locus
which
is.
overrides the other, context or zones?
I think that just made it more complicated.
Can
We should just stick
can the
with surrounding
context override the zone?
Yeah,
I give up,
I-
guys.
No, I'm just playing devil's advocate. Can the context of the surrounding area
no.
override the zone?
I would think
Right
it's
brain,
not,
left
but
brain.
I'll defer to Connie as a planner. What are your thoughts?
If it's not allowed by right in the zone, it's not going to happen. So, I think what we're looking for is the design guideline here, is what we're really looking for, is how high do you want to make it? You know, what are you looking for when you're creating this new mixed-use development? You know, how do you want it to look? Well, let's look around us and think about this. You're going to do a site analysis. Everybody, a professional is going to start by doing a site analysis, you know?
So, Don, with that, before we finish this part, can
Yeah.
I jump in? 'Cause I
Please
was the one
do.
that reopened all of this.
Yeah, go ahead.
Excuse me.
The reason I reopened it with the height is I kept thinking buildings that were gonna look like this. You guys can pass these around. I went on the web and I picked up some different mixed-use districts. And these are some of the things I came up with. You know, 3 floors above a business zone or commercial zone or whatever. And I kept looking at them saying, well, what do we like visually? And how do we get that into our bylaw? And here's a couple more which are 2-story. I think what I came up with mostly is, at least in my opinion, the roof line, whether it's peaked or flat, really changes the look of the building more than anything, rather than the height. I was stuck with, hey, the height, 50 feet, boom, that's it. But once you add a peaked roof, it changes the whole feel of the building. And I don't know how to compile that in and say, we would prefer a peaked roof over a flat roof building for aesthetic purposes or something like that. I started looking at like the packaged machinery building and saying, well, if that came up, and if the roof wasn't flat and even had a facade in the front that was peaked, it would make it look more like a village style. And that was, I mean, the last couple of pictures are two-story buildings with peaked roofs. I don't know the heights of those. I was looking at, and I was trying to figure out by stories, well, this looks like it has 3 floors above business. I'm guessing if each one's 12 feet, that brings it up to about 50 feet. And I think that's really what we're looking at here. What's visually, what do we want this project to look like?
So the question then becomes, when we determine height, the height, because you're right, to maximize usable space, there could be a bunch of flat roof projects, even though there will be design review as part of the special permit and site plan review process. The question then is, and I think, Ralph brings a good point, it's certainly, to have the peaked roof, that's going to be, the highest point of the peak is going to be the 50-foot marker. Are we, in effect, discouraging that or what are your thoughts?
My thoughts are to bring it to the board. I mean,
Yeah.
what I'd like to see is, if nothing else, so when you visually look at it, there's different roof lines, and it's not just flat like an industrial building. I mean, that's my thought on the project. And to me, that's a village style, to where you have different roof lines, and it sort of blends in with the community. But I don't know how to put that into a bylaw that says, you gotta do different roof lines, and some of them have to be peaked and flat. I mean, as far as the height goes, we've been living with 50 feet over there forever. I mean, that building currently is just over 50 feet. So, like I said, I know I brought the height back in, but it's because in my mind I was thinking, how do we change the look of it so it just doesn't look industrial, that it looks more like a, to me, village-style district. And I think part of that's probably gonna be site plan when they bring it in and design. But if there's not something in there that says, hey, we encourage this, or this is what we need to look for, under the site plan, they're gonna come in, the planning board's gonna look and say, it meets our criteria.
I share what Ralph is saying, and that's the last paragraph. And I didn't know how to incorporate that into a bylaw where I said heights of new buildings shall approximate those of adjacent and existing buildings. Diverse roof heights are encouraged and should complement the surrounding developed environment. And I took that directly from our design review. The last piece about flat roof lines are to be discouraged. Those are my words. I'm being honest with you. The other sentence I took from our bylaw, because I believe that's how we have always felt about unique developments, that there are going to be uses that are going to be different, and we just want them to be in harmony with what's here. That's all.
Through the chair, can it be done legally? Can we ask Connie, can that be done legally?
We have design guidelines in place, and yes, you may specify that you have a preference.
Yeah.
And again, I'm looking for some language, because the town of Marshfield has a mixed-use zoning district, and they are a coastal community, and I recall reading specifications to the roof line. They must honor the integrity of the coastal community, et cetera, et cetera. But you can ask for, they are called stepped, and they can be either with, the flat step that you think of,
Right.
but also the staggered roof lines, the gabled roof, if you will, at different heights, so that you have a sense of variety in the architecture, and not a dense box that
Right.
you want. hearing you want to avoid that boxy-like structure. You want something with character and tradition that reflects the traditional style of architecture that we see in town, somewhat even akin to what we have at Center Square, where you have your
Exactly.
gables, and we can yes, the short
We worked
answer,
hard on that.
yes,
Yes.
yes.
And so how can we work on, so we're gonna work on that language to try to put into this draft in terms of determining heights and saying, or no?
I thought.
You're on
this
the
pe-
on-deck circle.
This piece that I submitted, I mean, my intent was that whatever there would be 4.4 in the bylaw, you know, including the asterisk next to heights of new buildings, just as a feel-good stuff in terms of potentially, you know, the height requirements are there, above the height requirements are there, but in terms of just addressing what's already in our design review about building within existing areas. That's my intent.
Connor?
So a couple thoughts on all of that. I understand the concern, but I'm also not sure that any of that necessarily belongs in this bylaw, because it already makes reference in section 7 that it would all be part of design review. So shouldn't those just be guidelines that, none of those guidelines are explicitly spelled out here, those are elsewhere. And so those preferences could be put with the other preferences the town has for any other project that's subject to design.
My thoughts on this one is a petitioner coming in from the other, you know, just understand that, in my understanding with design review, and I'm certainly, it's evolved since I was on the board, we actually had a design review committee. And those are more suggestions. And I think here we make it clear in the bylaw with Maryland's language that it's not only a suggestion, it's kind of a, for lack of a better term, more of a directive that we want used best efforts to try to create a design, to understand that this is a village as opposed to being at the discretion of the design review board, which is, I don't think has any as much weight. It has more good faith parties working with each other, trying to come up with that. We had that with Center Square Grill. When Center Square Grill came in, which is a project by the petitioners, the petitioner is still the planning board, by M&M attorney. I remember they originally came in with the designs, the columns and so forth came in. Then they came back later in the project, back to the planning board, and realized there was perhaps some cost constraints and so forth to it, and tried to remove some of the design on there, feeling it was, even though I said, and so the comment I made, and the planning board made at the time to Frank Fitzgerald and Mr. Falcone, was we went through this entire process with the public coming in, and you sold this is the vision, this is the view, this is what we're gonna do. And here we are, right before the construction phase, to have this removed. And I distinctly remember Mr. Falcone looking, and it says, no, we will do what we promised the people we're gonna do, and hence we have the project that we have. So my point is that I think if we have it clear on the onset, this is the kind of standards we're trying to use for the town of East Long Meadow, that creating this village, and we want you up front, not to try to find necessarily the cheap way to do this, to do it the right way. And it's clear to them up front, as opposed to coming to a future design review board and then saying, well, we as a design review board, we like this peaked and we like this and that. No surprise, we've said, we discourage flat roof lines. We encourage this type of look right in the onset. And I think you're gonna have a developer that knows what he or she are expecting coming into this project, as opposed to being totally at the will of a design review board. But that's just, like I said, since we brought up Center Square Grill, I thought I would share that real-life example of what happened. Connie?
So through the chair, the planning board has as a tool site plan review. Under site plan review, architectural design, exterior. They can't look at anything going on inside the
Right.
four walls, but they can certainly stipulate to the exterior facade and the architectural. I don't think that in the past it's been utilized to the point where they're able to. And I strongly encourage any developer to bring with them the specifications, the materials that they're going to use for the exterior construction, so the planning board can weigh in and decide, maybe that isn't quite right, that isn't quite what we want to see. So I hope to encourage the planning board to, again, use the design guidelines, and granted, those are guidelines. The thing about guidelines is most developers really like to see them because it gives them a direction. If they come in and it's, oh, the slate is blank and they don't know what direction to go, they'll give you just about anything that's the cheapest that they can produce.
Right.
So we have the guidelines in place. Planning board has site plan. We have public comment that comes into play where the public can say, I really would prefer to see this in this particular area. It's my neighborhood that you're putting this mixed-use development in. And I want to just go back to the roof line. So sometimes you'll see as a reference point, the highest horizontal line of a sloped roof. So therefore, when you have your peak, you know you can be no higher than 35 feet. So you might want to use that verbiage again to kind of control the design you're looking for in what Marilyn so thoughtfully crafted. The highest horizontal line of the sloped roof. And you can certainly say, given the New England weather conditions, we discourage the use of a flat roof. Because we typically get leaky flat roofs.
The highest slope line of what?
The highest horizontal line
Oh,
of a
highest
sloped roof.
Horizontal, okay.
And most, roofs have come a long way today, but that snow load on a building mass can
Okay, the
still
highest
be.
horizontal line
Of a
is
sloped roof.
And
Yeah.
I like that language. We would add that language in the last section where it talks about heights of new buildings shall approximate those of adjacent and existing buildings. Diverse roof heights are encouraged. And we put it in that section in terms of the maximum 35-foot height for the roof. No, that can't be, well, including the peak.
So here you have flat roof lines are to be discouraged, and you might want to state why, and again, because we live in New England, here in New England, because then you don't get as much pushback from people, or a developer. I mean, granted, roofing's come a long way, but I know we still have issues with this school, with the leaking roof.
Wasn't that many years ago that with, I believe it was an October snowstorm, that we had multiple flat roof buildings in town that had faults over the winter because of the snow load, and they had to remove all the snow from them, and there was cracks and stuff in them. And as far as the height goes, we do have a definition in reference to a building, the vertical distance between the highest point of the roof and the average grade of land on which the building is located. So if we're maxing out at 50 feet, that would be the top of the peak to the ground, would be the maximum height. Again, if you do that, you're probably taking away one of the floors, I'm assuming, or the upper floor would end up being a smaller condensed in the middle, especially depending on the width of the building and stuff. Like I said, these are all things just
Right.
to think about.
Well, depending on the slope of the land too, if I may, if you remember the addition to the center school in Longmeadow, they built the library into the berm, so you had daylight. So
Right.
you can still have that floor space, but it takes an architect who's looking, and most, again,
Yeah.
they do look at the land, the intrinsic quality of the land, and they design a structure to honor the land. And years ago, you'd bring in fill, and it's not quite so much that way anymore.
That's because of the cost of it.
What about the depth? Basement apartments,
What about
the
that?
depth.
Underground.
I don't think you see that many in a
Again,
quality.
we're just bringing it up while we're talking.
I think that
Looking to,
today, you're not going to necessarily, and especially in what I envision for the space based on what's been discussed.
Right.
I don't think that developer has, the words are unfair.
And we're looking at the
She's
entire,
forming words.
the entire town, I know, not just a specific developer.
I don't think that basement
And it's not, I
apartments
wasn't
are-
referring to the
Yeah,
current developer, I was referring to the entire town.
Don't forget, the folks who are renting today are, they're not the tenant of yesterday, and they're not going to,
Cellar dwellers.
yes!
Okay.
I was for years.
It's just not, well, no, you want a view, you want daylight, you don't want to see, it's just, it's evolved,
Okay.
so.
No, I'm just throwing it out there, affordable housing.
It's okay.
so we're, all right, so just making sure we're clear. Okay, Ralph astutely pointed out our current zoning and its definition of height is the roof. Do we want to, as part of this, change that provision and include language like the highest horizontal line of a sloped roof in there, or simply go with the existing language and that's the understanding?
I think the existing definition is sufficient.
I
Okay.
agree.
All right, so let me just go line for line on the draft, just to make sure we're clear. 4.4, the maximum height of structures within a mixed-use village district shall reflect the zone and surrounding context where the district is to be created. Am I missing anything?
That's what I have.
All right?
And so we want to make that singular zone instead of plural.
That's why do
Right.
we want that, the zone and the surrounding context.
I think it's clear what it means
Yeah.
without the S. So the
Such-
zone and surrounding context.
Such
okay.
height requirements are as the following. A, all residential zones, maximum height 35 feet. Height may increase to 45 feet upon special permit application and planning board review and approval. So this would be the same special, because this mixed-use village district is intrinsically part of a special permit application. So this is all within that same, or is this an additional amendment to the special permit
Oh, I wasn't thinking that way.
to
Yeah.
add this? Otherwise, this is already under special permit. So I just want to get clarification on what your thoughts are on that.
That was one of my other questions
How
was.
about we take out the special permit application?
Just planning board review and approval.
Or upon,
Planning
Right.
board review and approval.
And the reason why
It's already
I,
under special permit.
and that's already the
Yeah.
but this is the standard that currently exists in the residential zone. So that's why I carried that language. So that's fine, because I know the whole project is under special permit.
okay, so height may increase to 45 feet.
Upon application and planning board review and approval.
Before we continue, I had another question.
Okay, Connor?
Why would we have A, B, and C 45 feet, but D would be the only one we would want 50 feet?
I explained that. It's next to a residential zone.
Yeah, but what's the difference in 5 feet?
That's actually what's allowed in those districts right now.
Right.
So I think what she did is she took out in the business district is allowed to go to 40 feet, residential is allowed to go to 35, up to 45 feet
Right,
under special
right,
permit,
right.
and industrial garden park,
Oh, I
50.
understand why we had 35, 40, 35 as like the original maximum, but if the planning board is considering all other factors, shouldn't all 4 categories be 50 feet equally as the maximum allowed?
Because I don't want to see in East Long Meadow what Long Meadow experienced when Enfield did Mayfair Place. And they have these huge buildings right in the backyard of residential neighborhoods. Granted, it's a separate town, but there was no consideration for the residents that live along, I believe it's Maple Street, that abut the city line or the state line, and this development next door, there's no buffering, it's all right there in their backyard, and I feel that we need to do better here in East Long Meadow.
But in the rest of the bylaw, we've already put in provisions for having buffers and open space and green space. It's not like you're just gonna have a straight-through clearing to the next parcel over that's
But 50 feet is
high.
hard to hide. Yeah,
I
I
don't
don't want
know
to
if it's-
argue with you on this, I just feel that,
Here's, I think I may have a compromise. Here's a thought. Hear me out first, guys, because you're gonna say, what are you thinking? All residential zones, maximum height 35 feet, period. Hear me out. Okay? And then get rid of the height may increase to 45 feet upon application. Done. If a petitioner wants that to happen, then the petitioner would need to amend our zoning bylaw, come back to us, and we would have to consider it. I think that gives abutters in a residential zone a lot more protection from a height. And that also addresses, to a degree, what Connor was saying is, if we're okay in principle of going up to 45 feet in a residential zone, what's the difference in extra 5 feet? So it creates a clear break between what's in a residential zone and what's in business and commercial and industrial underlying. And it doesn't allow somebody to say, yeah, it's maximum 35 feet, but I'm gonna ask for 45 feet. So there won't be this 5-foot difference, it'll be a 15, up to 15-foot difference. And if a petitioner really feels enamored with going above there, then the petitioner can try to get the council to do an amendment to this zoning bylaw, come back over here, and then we would have discussion, which I think would placate and also address some of the concerns of residents. Throwing it out there, what are your thoughts on that?
I think it creates a conflict with our existing bylaw, because already, at least all residential zones, that piece, because that's already in our bylaw where the maximum height is 35 feet. And under special permit application and approval and review and approval of the planning board, they can go up to 45 feet if the project warrants it. That's in every residential list, or, you know, in our current bylaw. So if we just said the maximum height was 35 feet, that's in conflict now with what's already there.
But this is unique in of itself. This is a 40-acre piece minimum, all right, 40-acre piece with quite a potential impact on the town. And it's gonna be more so than a subdivision coming in or somebody trying to do something and asking for a special permit to build a structure over here. These are big projects right here. And I'm just throwing,
No,
again, this
no.
was just to throw it out there to create a little bit more a distance between the other zones, somebody trying to build on a golf, you know.
I guess my focus on this draft, and that's all it was and is, was to envision the project too in these locations and giving a little bit more flexibility to some diversity, but with recognition of the surrounding area where it's being built.
Okay.
I mean, I kept thinking 50 feet in the middle of a residential zone is too high, truly. It may not be too high for you, but it's too high for everyone else who's living there. And this New England architecture, the quality of life and the aesthetic look that we've all come to East Long Meadow to expect and enjoy.
The project in Connecticut, help me out in there, I forgot. What's the height of that? Do we know?
Oh, I don't know. I just know visually what it looks like.
Two-story, isn't it?
Two stories.
It's 2 stories with.
But it's
And that's
visually, but it.
height-wise.
35 feet, it's
Yeah.
2 stories.
All right.
It's,
Well,
but it's taller than the
plus it's
houses
wood
that are
framed.
there.
Under the building code, I was just talking to Kevin, 36 feet or 40 feet, there's a maximum for a wood frame. Once you go above that, then you have to reinforce it with steel, basically like steel girders, and that'll get you up to 60 feet.
Okay.
Anything above that is gotta be built differently.
Okay. All right, Connor, any thoughts?
Yeah, a few. I mean, I understand that we don't want gigantic structures in the middle of a residential neighborhood, but to use your example though, if we have like Bluebird Acres, it's surrounded by residential
And that's 45
areas.
feet.
Right, and it's
Right,
45,
right.
but that's still a pretty tall structure, so why would that be acceptable? but it
Because
would be
the
inherently
topography in that
unacceptable
use, the
elsewhere?
topography went down. So from street side, it doesn't look, because it was a lull or a gully in the parcel, which allowed the planning board to be more creative with that particular use and then change the bylaw for that reason. But that's why it's under special permit, that extra 10 feet, so that the planning board would have the ultimate approval of whether this is in the best interest of the surrounding neighborhood.
I think my final point is that the more restrictive we get with heights, the more of a benefit we take away from the concept of mixed use. Because to me, one of the driving factors is, rather than take up horizontal land, if we're all concerned about open space and green space and not taking up 40 acres, wouldn't we want to go higher so that you have plenty of extra space around the buildings? That's my perspective. I would
It's
rather
funny, I felt
see
that way about
go
the
a little up
commercial
instead of out.
residential. I felt that way about the commercial residential ratio as well. And the more we get away from the commercial piece, the more it's not a mixed use. And so, that's,
Yeah, fair
it's
point.
a struggle. It's indeed a struggle.
I mean, I'll withdraw. Again, I just wanted to throw the comment out because what Connor brought up was the, seemingly small difference between 50 feet and 45 feet.
So what's the difference between 55 and 50? Why don't we just go up another 5? What about 60 and 50?
Yeah, I know, we're getting,
You gotta stop
I know,
somewhere is the
right.
whole
Right.
thing, and that's why I think this matches our existing what we have, and that's,
It's more in harmony with what we currently have
Right.
for the entire town.
So keep A as printed,
We will remove the special permit.
except for the word special permit.
Right.
Okay, so.
And I would say that I would recommend remove special permit for
all of them,
all of them.
because everything's under special permit.
Right.
Correct. All right, I'll continue reading. I'll, just for the sake of clarity, I'm gonna repeat. 4.4A, all residential zones, maximum height 35 feet. Height may increase to 45 feet upon application and planning board review and approval. We good with that? B, commercial and business zones. Maximum height 40 feet. Height may increase to 45 feet upon application and planning board review and approval. C, golf recreational zone. Maximum height is 35 feet. Height may be increased to 45 feet upon application and planning board review and approval. D, industrial and industrial garden park zones. Maximum height 45 feet. Height may increase to 50 feet with structures 400 feet from property line. Now, I'll throw my comment in here. Do you want to say from all property lines? It just seems to suggest a property line. So if you're 50 feet from the front property line, but 400 feet from the rear property line, that seems to suggest that that's okay. Do we have does it matter which property line?
I would like to see us strike 400 feet from the property line altogether.
Why is that?
Because,
Yeah. Why is that?
Because we already have that it
Setbacks.
must be 100 feet from the front. And then, I know we're not talking about a specific project, but we also can't create a bylaw that's gonna prevent any project, especially one we know about. And if you were to draw 400 feet in, that's a pretty small square out of 40 acres that you're
where'd
allowing.
you get that from?
I made it.
You should have sent
Can I
it to
show
all of
you?
us, that's
Yes.
pretty good.
Madam Bashir?
Yeah.
Actually, okay, so this is 330 Chestnut Street,
Yeah.
which is not an application
No, it's not an
before the town.
application,
Okay,
but
I
it's
just want to
just
make
a
sure it's understood.
general consideration.
Absolutely. The reason why I suggested that was the developer suggested it similarly in their first application before the town,
If,
right?
In a different context.
yes,
Well,
That allowed a taller setback beyond the 4.
I realize that,
Well-
But I was looking at, the desire or the design of a development, would you put your tallest building on the street? Would you rather put the taller building set back so that the smaller or the shorter buildings were surrounding so that aesthetically it looked less, overwhelming? Picture perfect.
I didn't get it.
Yeah. Anyway, that was my intent. I'm not to,
I think if we,
Through-
through the chair, I
Please.
think if we encourage peaked roofs, I don't think we have to go to 400 feet. I think it's more visual, and the roof and the size of the building is going to look smaller with a peaked roof rather than with a flat roof straight up. And I think that's really what we're looking for, is more
absolutely.
visual.
This discussion that we had previously with the previous bylaw is why I put it there.
And I think that's exactly what we were thinking before. Well, if it's a flat roof, we do a shorter building here and a taller building behind it. Like I said, if we're gonna encourage peaked roof or different roof lines, my opinion is we can remove that criteria.
So why don't we word the industrial garden park zone and remove, may increase to 50 feet upon application and
Yep.
planning board review and approval.
Isn't the underlying industrial, I'm sorry, through the chair, isn't the underlying industrial garden park 50 feet to begin with?
That's correct.
So aren't we just 50 feet?
Well, yes, that's correct. But if with the planning board in its wisdom wants to bring, this is a new district, and the issue would be that you are abutting residential zones at 35 feet. And that's.
Right, and that's the context that the planning board will take into account.
And
But the
it does give you that, it does give the planning board that privilege to acknowledge 50 feet if indeed it works for the surrounding environment.
It isn't gonna be a default to 50 feet once you've taken away the industrial zone and replaced it with this new
Right,
zone.
right.
Just because you can't, hopefully it's clear that this isn't designed to say you can cherry pick parts of the original industrial zone and bring that back in.
We're not cherry picking at all, and
No.
you weren't cherry picking. The cherry pick that this committee has done is said, every place else, we're gonna use the underlying zoning as the height, except for the one sitting in front of me, we're gonna squish you down.
But it was with an explanation, John. That's not against.
I understand the explanation.
It's not against a development that is yet to be seen. It's the fact that you abut the Fields of Chestnut, which is a 35-foot height requirement. And so, I mean, I don't,
No, I
you
know
know,
I know what you're saying,
I
Bill.
acquiesced
Yeah.
back when we decided on a 50-foot height. I acquiesced on that because I was trying to be understanding and a team player, but then I started thinking about 50-foot next to neighborhoods in residential zones, and I just felt that was not in harmony with the residential feel of East Long Meadow, which is a bedroom community. And so we're just trying to make it right for our town. I mean, you folks can do what you want. It's
No,
a draft.
I know where Maryland's going with this. This is basically what we're doing is, we have the industrial zone. The industrial zone will allow 50 feet, but that's for an industrial building. Okay, these are gonna be residential, it's gonna be village and so forth. And I think there's obviously, the difference between that and an industrial building are far and wide. So even though the underlying zone it's not an overlay district, it's gonna be, and the reason for this different criteria is not a function of saying we wanna use parts of the existing zone. It's that we have to recognize the existing zone was there. And
Right, and
areas
the- and
outside
the
of that are still
context.
subject to it. So not to create this whole shock of between using the same criteria that you would use on one zone as the same to others, because it's gonna be different. Putting a project like this, as we talked about, where Bluebird Acres was, well, there was criteria used that reflected the topography, because if there's that swale, it drops down. A building does not have that same visual shock or awe that you would have if you built it on where should it lie on a hill or higher point. You know, and so we just have to recognize, and I think the reason for the criteria is not to necessarily bring that in, but it also to be cognitive of what's going around what's around it. You're across the street, not from a bunch of houses, you're across the street from, I keep calling it American Saw, but that's dating myself on that one, Black and Decker.
If you call me packaged machinery, that's American Saw.
There you go. But, it's right, let's just say Bluehost, remember that, I remember that short-lived
I
thing.
can't go that far back.
No, that was right, that was after, actually. But anyway, I digress. So, what I'm trying to say is that what it's doing is trying to basically, as Connie pointed out, is being conscious of the context of where it was and the new project is. It's not to say, because we're in a zone that is allowed 50-foot industrial buildings, that by
Exactly.
default, we want to have
Exactly.
in 50 feet residential / retail facilities and buildings and so forth in there. And I think it's basically putting it in perspective to the area. Now, as I'm thinking about this, pretending I'm an attorney for a future developer, and this is where I think we need to maybe tighten up something a little bit here, because I know what Maryland's intent was, is to say with special permit application, which meant to say, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I am, is with a higher standard of criteria, is what it's saying. If I represented ABC developer and I wanted to come in, I would say, you're already going through special permit anyway. Why not just ask for 45 feet and all this stuff? You're already going through the process. I think we should, I wouldn't say go for the 35 feet, go for the 45. What difference does it make? And I think that the effectiveness of trying to keep it within 35 feet is really not that effective. I think in effect, anybody coming in a residential zone will apply for 45 feet because they're doing it anyway. We'll apply for 45, we'll apply for 45, and we'll apply for 50. I think what we need to do, and is to come up with what I believe the intent of what Maryland was putting together, is to say, here's the criteria for 35 feet, but if you go through special permit, a higher standard, they will then allow 45 feet. We don't have that right now. We're still under the underlying original special permit. I do think we need to come up with, for what, I don't have the words off the top of my head, I'm sure I can come up with them, I'm sure we can come up with them, but something to show us that a higher standard, a higher threshold is necessary beyond the standard special permit application that is part and parcel with the original application.
If you look at a special permit application, the special permit applies to uses within our community that are different. They are uses that might involve, well, here, in this case, it's a totally different use. It's an unknown quantity for our town. It's a combination of commercial and residential uses, and so therefore, the town would want to put this kind of use under special permit. Restaurants, those are uses that tend to have issues of nuisance issues sometimes, or impact issues. It's all about impact for the town. Ultimately, a special permit triggers a public hearing. And that's the important piece of anything that we do, is the public hearing. Special permits, the planning board has the ability and the requirement to establish conditions based on what's before them. And so, yeah, a higher standard, it's a, there may be things that come up with this development that are foreign to the rest of the town, but it's within a special permit, and then the planning board can decide if the conditions and the impact are in a good place for the town or not. So,
Well, I'm just trying to say is what's the,
so I mean, I don't know that we can, how can we require a higher standard?
no, I mean, well, there is gonna be, the thing is, I come in saying I want 35 feet to the planning board, all right, and I'm going through special permit, why wouldn't I, from the onset, say I wanna apply for 45 feet? What, to me, it doesn't create any teeth.
You go for the most you can get.
Exactly, Sid.
Not
except with
necessarily.
commercial development.
A lot of times the developer will basically have a layout and all and say, okay, we know we need this many units, this size and all, we want the project to look like this, because if it looks like this, more people are gonna rent and whatnot.
I would
So
still
they
go,
may,
whether I use it or not, I would go for the maximum, even if it was
Right.
lower.
Okay, well, okay, that's the piece too.
I would,
If-
you would. Okay, after Marilyn, you're next.
You know, as I say, the minimum height, I'm looking at a development as being varying heights, a diversity of heights. So, you know, to me, the 35 up to 45 would send the message that we don't want to see straight 45-foot high buildings in the development. We don't want to see
also don't
that.
wanna just see a flat roof,
Right, we don't want to
35
see
foot
that,
high.
no.
And that may be one of the changes that they come in with and say, listen, we wanna do these few buildings
At
at
35
35
feet.
These we wanna bump up, we want this roof line here, but we need to go to 45 because we're doing this.
Well, I think we should, you know, in the spirit of what I believe Marilyn was gonna say, and Conrad, I didn't forget you, you're right after me. I think we need to suggest in its original verbiage that the special permit application, I'll pick on residential, is for 35 feet. And there's an additional criteria, and the term was used special permit, but perhaps something else, where it can be applied in that same special permit to be a higher amount. I think we need to kind of make it a little clearer what that criteria is, even if it's more generalized what it is. Can it be further, with further setback for the higher structures, with something, with whatever, some kind of criteria. Otherwise, as Sid pointed out, and I pointed out, if we were those developers, there's no way in heck we wouldn't go for 45 feet right off the bat. Connor, it's yours.
I think we also need to circle back around to point D, because if the other points A, B, and C were saying that the default maximum height is whatever that zone allows, I mean, in our table 3.2 in the existing zoning bylaw, industrial does say 50 feet is the maximum height, but then it also goes on to list abutting a residential district, maximum height 50 feet, abutting a commercial business or another industrial district, 50 feet. So we're already setting ourselves up for a conflict that we're trying to say that the maximum is less than
But we're
any
not-
other abutting.
But this isn't the industrial district, it's a mixed-use development village next to now, and I will tell you, the residential zones have been created after that particular, that criteria was established in the bylaw. You know, it doesn't matter to me ultimately, I'm just thinking about the folks that live and work and play in these areas. You know, I just want it all to be in harmony with one another.
I understand the harmony, but I guess I just don't understand. I understand that the parcel would become
And most of the
a
buildings in
different
the industrial
zone.
garden park are not as tall as package machinery.
Yeah, I mean,
Perhaps not, but if a parcel like that is already surrounded by industrial, and industrial already allows 50, why would we make it less than 50 by default?
But we're allowing it to 50,
because it's a residential project.
right.
Yeah,
right,
industrial has
right.
its
It's not
own-
an industrial
Has
project.
needs a lot of warehousing, a lot of other particular needs for industrial that you don't have with residential. So if you're building an Amazon facility and you want to go 50 feet, that same criteria, just because somebody's coming on the same zone that had an Amazon facility, doesn't mean that they can build residential structures up to 50 feet. It's you know, there's a lot more impact, if you will, in some ways of residential with 1,000 people living there versus a storage facility in some ways.
I suppose I don't
Watching
understand
them.
that distinction though, because if,
I'm gonna let John comment, because I can see he's finally.
whether or not it's residential or if it's just a 50-foot high warehouse, it's still a structure that's 50 feet. I'm not quite sure what the difference between that is.
All right, John, your thoughts?
I think it should be an underlying zone, obviously, and particularly in your preference for a peaked roof. The reason why the 50 to 60 in the original bylaw
Was
2 years
50.
ago was to allow for the pitch of the peaked roof.
Right.
And, you know, we had talked back then about changing how we measure height to the eave instead of to the top, and let the peaked roof go tall, because that's what New England likes. Everybody said, no, okay, great. But now you're saying, you know, instead of saying 50 feet to a peaked roof, you're saying 45 feet to a peaked roof. And you just keep squishing down the peak. And you've already, in the bylaw, unless you're eliminating it, and by those pictures, maybe you are, you're already saying mixed use is 3 stories. I assume you're not eliminating that.
That was
Those pictures
4
only for, like I said,
I-
viewing
Right.
different
I
projects,
understand that,
different thoughts and.
but the first 2 mixed-use pictures were 4-story buildings.
Yes.
Right, so
Right.
throw those away. But, so, and again, if you're saying mixed use is 3 stories, great, then I think you've done your bow to the street, we want the street to be lower, look, okay, we understand that. But again, with your preference for a peaked roof, I don't, the reduction in height is antithetical to that. You're just squishing the peak down and making it look funny.
So if at the end of the day, a developer would come in, looking at this language, assuming it stays intact, there's, a maximum, should we create a maximum height of living space with an additional amount to encourage
That's
peak roofs?
complicated. That's complicated, don't you think?
I don't know, I'm throwing it out there, it's on the table. I mean, I'm just trying to find, because like I said, if you read it as it stands right now, the original wording suggested a higher standard special permit. However, as we discussed this
already
open,
under
it's already
special,
there.
right.
So however, that doesn't usurp your original thought of saying a higher standard shall be required to go to the planning board to ask for a higher height than 35 feet to 45 feet. Okay, that was and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that's what I've read, what I derived from this, is you're saying, here's what you apply for, but, you can go up 10 feet higher with a higher standard.
Well, I just don't envision, and maybe this is what directed my thoughts in the first place, but I really don't envision all of the buildings being the same height in a village district. I mean, we don't know what the model is going to look like. We don't know who the developer will be, if at all. But the point is that that was my focus, and that I wasn't saying that 50 feet was not permitted. It was I wasn't saying it was prohibited. I was saying that in the right situation, it would be the maximum roof height under special permit in the industrial garden park zone. I think about the industrial zone next to Baldwin's, down on the end of Baldwin Street.
Oh, yeah.
And, how they're just nestled around residential. Somehow we need to not lose sight of impact in our community.
Well, to me, the impact doesn't come necessarily from the height. It comes from once a project is done, someone in the mixed-use development sitting on their balcony, looking down at the neighborhood with their stereo cranked up. To me, that's more of an impact than,
Well-
say, 5 feet to 15 feet on a building.
Or with their binoculars.
Well,
I mean, your
there are a
point
lot
is
of
well
binoculars
taken.
out there.
Your point is well
Yeah.
taken. I don't want this to be adversarial,
Yeah.
but Ralph had said to me, we really need to focus on a project or a bylaw that addresses East Long Meadow, and that's what we're doing.
Absolutely, no, and I said, first of all, I was going to say, this is well-crafted, and I think what we want to do is give language to future planning boards and so forth of the direction that, ultimately the council is going to be, suggesting. And I think, as I read every one of these bullet points, it suggests a special permit application criteria of A, and if you want to go to B, it suggests there's some criteria, additional criteria to look at to allow that number to be north. If we don't have that criteria, then why even have the first bit of
So-
language, maximum height
Okay.
35? Just have a
Right.
maximum height 45, sit.
Question, clear my mind, I'm getting older here. When we're looking at this is designed for not the location itself, but the surrounding locations.
I think both.
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 Both,
Well, no, I mean, so
Yeah, no,
the fields, they're considered residential.
correct, they are.
So any
Yeah.
development in an industrial that's next to a residential can only be 35 feet or maybe increased up to 45.
No.
Well, that's what I'm getting here.
No, it's the
No,
the
no.
context for the industrial
Right.
to even get to its permitted height of 50
But to me,
is you need an enhanced review
okay,
to say that you have to,
And that's what I'm.
a development next to the fields would have to acknowledge that the fields is there.
right.
So for example, to go to 50 feet, maybe the setback for a building that's 50 feet tall
Right.
would have to be 100 feet from that
Okay.
residential zone boundary. That would be a reasonable accommodation
Right.
of the taller building
Okay.
to the lower zone.
Okay.
And that's where I'm going, that's what I'm going with, that we have the standard criteria, the walk-in with special permit application, 45 feet. What criteria does the planning board need to look at to bump it up to 50?
An enhanced setback at twice the height that they're seeking.
That's a
See,
thought.
I didn't get to her 400 though, so that didn't.
Well,
Well, I think
that
part
was,
of the other.
but that was your number, but for, yeah, I understand, it was the slightly different because it was higher heights, but that was the number that you used, and I thought that seemed to reflect what we were trying to do was not have huge buildings on the public way.
I think part of the other criteria is gonna be our last line. You know, you put in that peaked roofs are preferred over flat top. And if you have different heights and all, the developer can say, hey, listen, I wanna do peaked roof and I wanna do this, and that's why I need to go to that height. It's an explanation to the planning board, instead of coming in and saying, hey, residential zone, I'm going up to 45 feet, everything's flat across, and we're gonna cram in as much as we can. And the planning board can say, no, that doesn't meet our criteria. But if you start here and you do different heights and all for visual appeal, that would meet the criteria.
Well, then I think we do, in terms of how this is designed, I think we need to keep with the spirit of what Marilyn suggested by having a second tier process for bringing it up to a higher level, to have the initial onset application level, maximum 35 feet. And I think we need to suggest something, whether it is, I'm making this up, guys, okay, just throwing it out there. 45 feet, but not to exceed 25% of the buildings. I'm just throwing it out there. I mean, again, this is, there's no horses in the race on this. This is just a
Yeah.
thought. Just kind of, what I'm just saying, my end point is I like what this said, what Marilyn put together. What I think we need to do is to say to a developer, Sid developer, Don developer, don't just come in and apply for 45 on the, because it's gonna be the same bloody criteria anyway. Just say, here's your standard, to go plus, we're gonna require further setback, as John pointed out, or in addition to that, not more than blah, blah percent being of there, some distinction, because otherwise, guys, I think we should just say 45, 45, 45, 50, and
Up to.
up to. Otherwise, it's a,
Well, through the chair, are we setting John up for a lawsuit if we say maybe increased and the planning board says no?
At planning board review
Under
and
special
under
permit,
special
no.
permit granting
special
authority,
permit, they have a
that
lot, they have
authority.
that power, yeah.
But they could still,
Well, anybody can sue for
right,
anything.
as we find out.
Yeah.
Through the
No.
chair,
Yes,
Connie had a comment back, she probably has forgotten it because we've been going on, and I saw her raise her hand a couple times, so I just wanted to.
Oh,
no, Connie, I apologize, I was kind
That's all right.
of gravitating right here.
That's okay, it had something to do with roof. You know, there are different definitions for, and there are pictures for roof style and design, and, you know, what you're looking for is a stepped roof, you're not looking for a flat roof. So, you also, in discussing the roof, I had from the highest horizontal line of a sloped roof is the roof ridge. So if you go back to your definition that was created, can we put under the maximum, can we say that A, residential zones, the maximum height of the roof ridge is 35 feet?
That's
And
your,
that,
Your height definition does that now.
So there you go,
You don't need
to state it again.
you don't need to reinvent the wheel, your wheel already works.
You know, I don't want, believe it or not, I'm not looking to make this full of minutia, complicated. You know, if, the planning board, we've heard over and over again, you know, through special permit, has the authority and will put together hopefully a wonderful project when and if we have to deal with it. But these are guidelines, these are, and you understand where I was coming from with this. If you wanted to say maximum height 35 feet, height may increase to 45 feet upon enhance, but see, the trouble is then you have to define enhance.
May,
You,
I'm sorry, finish.
I don't know what, I'm just battling here, I'm
Through the
just
chair,
trying to figure this out.
I do have a question for you guys. 35 feet is 3 floors?
Yes.
If you go up one more floor to 4 floors, what's the height on that? 10 feet you need?
Yeah, it's 10.
2 feet.
It's,
So 45 without the pitched roof?
right.
Okay.
We, and I think for clarification, because this wasn't, it was brought up, but this draft that I submitted is section 4.4. Section 4.4 in the bylaw, in the draft that we were working with.
Right.
Said the maximum height of structure shall be 50 feet with a 4-story residential limit and a 3-story mixed-use limit. Now, that was from a previous discussion that we had as a committee, with the max, or as I say, the maximum height's 50 feet. Then then it was brought up again, and I was thinking and concerned about surrounding zones that are not 330 Chestnut Street. And so came up with this. That basically, I mean, for now, it has eliminated 4-story residential and 3-story mixed use, because I don't think that matters. I believe that the developer has the height requirement and they have the ability to build however they see fit within these guidelines. I don't know that you can get, with a 50-foot height requirement, can you get more than 4 stories?
Can I get more than 4 stories with 50 feet with a flat roof? Yes.
And if you dig down,
I'm sorry?
if you dig down.
So,
It just keeps wanting to go underground.
Absolutely.
Not on 330 Chestnut.
No, I understand.
no, they've got water. They've got a stream.
Lots of water.
So anyway, so we
Sauna.
can, so if that's important, based on these changes, we need to incorporate that language. The maximum of 4-story residential and 3-story mixed-use limit, if you still feel that way.
I never thought that was coming out.
I'm sorry?
I never thought that was coming out.
I think
What, the
it's,
4 stories and
The 3-story and 4-story, I thought that stayed, I didn't realize it came out in drift. Again, we're not reading what you're reading.
No, and I didn't send it to you, and I notified the committee that it was in such draft form that we hadn't discussed it, and I didn't want to create any issues that we didn't have to have. So you certainly can have a copy of it with our changes.
Yeah, with the edits. I'm sorry.
No.
All right. So,
I think whether you
go ahead, Connie.
say, whether you keep the 4-story, 3-story thing, or whether you try to put in these multiple paragraphs, you're just trying to express the same thing. It's just 2 different ways to do it. One is
Yeah.
way more complicated, and one is.
I just think we just need, and there should be a way from a planning point of view we can do this, is to give simple direction to the planning board and say, there's 2 criterias, okay? And our highest standard of criteria in this town is special permit. And I don't know if there's an advanced special permit, I'm making this up, guys, something like that, to suggest that, because I'm telling you, there's no way in the world that I would represent a developer and say, don't at least go for
max.
it. Go for the max.
If you gave me 45 feet as of right,
Yeah.
I'd take that all day.
Take it.
That's what I'm, yeah,
I'd take it and run with it.
right, so it's basically the
But
first
you're not
point.
doing that.
No, but the first point doesn't distinguish the standard. Your original version did, if this were site plan review and then go to special permit for the extra, it suggests there are two standards. But the fact is, it is special permit. What is the second step? What additional element of special permit do we want to add?
Your carrot is a carrot, not a stick.
Yeah, it's-
Encourage the lower height by
Right,
not having it be a special permit. And then have the incentive of the special permit
Joe.
to be the higher height.
And what's that incentive gonna cost me to go to 45? And that comes through your design guidelines.
In a residential zone, or in our case,
All right, well,
what's
I-
it gonna cost us to go to 50
I'm
feet
still-
or some higher height?
I'm still dealing with the language as amended to be voted, that we're discussing. And as amended, it suggests a single tier of special permit. And as you pointed out, as we pointed out, the first tier, unless for whatever reason you don't want it, but that's purely subjective, there is no incentive to go for that first tier of height. None. None whatsoever.
Well, there is.
What would be the
It's driven
incentive?
by cost.
Yeah, but you're already buying the land, you're already doing all the site costs, why wouldn't you want to make it higher, you know?
Because what is that cost gonna be incrementally to go from 35 to 45? And that's gonna be in the design guidelines. I might not wanna do anything beyond that.
Yeah.
Because it's the cost of the project.
I might
Right.
not have the land for the additional thing. And again, or I might not wanna go for a special permit. But in this instance, you need to go for the special permit anywhere.
Right.
That's where your incentive doesn't exist.
Yeah,
If you eliminate a special permit for a lower height, you'll have people that say, I can go as of right, not have to deal with increased setbacks, et cetera, take a lower height.
Go ahead, Bill.
In
Go
any
for a special
project,
permit
it's
anyway.
what is the zoning, what am I allowed to do as of right, what does it cost to do the project?
All right. Connie,
So I actually want to segue from Joe's comment, and where planners look is the table of uses. That's where we're gonna look. We're gonna need to know what's the maximum height that is allowed in this in this district by right. And we're also going to look at the definitions. The verbiage that you're crafting, while detail-oriented, isn't where we're going to go first. And it's sort of like the synopsis. And you look to see what's allowed, and then you go to the ordinance or the bylaw, and you further examine what is allowed. So if you want these stipulations set forth, I would make sure that they're in the table of use.
Oh, they will be.
Absolutely.
But
Oh, yeah,
you don't
absolutely.
you really don't need you don't need the verbiage so much. It's superfluous. It becomes difficult to weed through, again, say it in the table of use. I mean, and you want to be mindful to make sure that this matches up. If you decide to incorporate, because we know when we revise something.
Yes, we know that.
And you can put these comments as footnotes in the table of use also.
Yes. That's exactly what I thought we were gonna do.
My computer
Put it in
won't.
here and put it in the
Well, that's
table
all
of
right.
use.
No, I'm
We'll-
just, that's
Bullet
just a
points down
joke,
underneath.
yeah. I'm sorry?
I thought we would, once we get the verbiage here added into the table, 3.2, we just like what we normally do down below. One bullet point says, you're allowed to go to this height. If you want to go to this height,
yeah, that's
And this
my
is-
stumbling
this is
block.
in-
If you want to go to this height, and that's when you went, that's where I'm at. What is the standard? Do we want to go for it? Otherwise, why even have this height
Why-
if you're already going to you're going to go for this height
Through
anyway?
the chair, why don't we stop doing what-ifs and just,
Hammer it out.
I like all residential zones. Maximum height, 35 feet. You came up with that for a reason. You added on, may increase to 45 feet. Well, why do we want to increase to 45 feet? Let's keep it at 35.
Because it's the current standard in residential zones
Well,
as we
let's-
speak.
Let's keep it at 35. And my thought is, commercial and business, maximum 40. Same thing with golf and recreational, industrial and garden park. My thought, maybe a maximum of 50 feet, but from 45, but that's something for.
In where? In golf recreation?
Under industrial and
Oh,
garden park.
okay.
But again, that's something for everyone to throw in. I think we're getting too minutia here.
Well, and there was a comment that
I know we want to do it right.
John made about, you want the development to be sensitive to the the residential
Right.
piece that's next door. That was the focus of this, because we're dealing with a residential mixed-use development in an industrial garden park area potentially that abuts a residential
Right.
area. When the metal recycling facility was potentially gonna purchase or come to Packaged Machinery, there was no ability to do this, to protect that residential area. We have an opportunity now to incorporate that kind of language in this district that we're creating, and I want to protect the people that live there,
Right.
you know.
So
No,
let's do a maximum then, with no addition for increasing. If we're gonna keep the maximum for the industrial garden park at 45, keep it at 45. Or
Or it's
keep it
existing
at
50.
50.
Well, I think there should be standards, if, you know, say 50 with peaked roofs. I think there should be really clear on that one, that the space, if you're going up to 45 or 50, whatever, it's gonna have peaked roofs. It doesn't suggest that in here, it's only at the will of the planning board and their design review to do that, but it won't, you could, in theory, put a 50-foot flat roofed / commercial,
Right.
residential apartment-esque type building in there. But I think there should be a maximum of this with consideration for design of peaked roofs and architectural design to reduce flat roof space up to 50 feet, up subject to special permit. Now we have standards over here. Okay, we have two different criteria over here. If they want to go higher, but then again, hearing myself talk, we also don't want to discourage or give the impression that we like flat roof lines if you go up to 45 feet. We don't. I think Maryland's language was spot on. Flat roof lines are to be discouraged. I think we want to increase, if we're going higher than 45 feet, for the sake of discussion, I'll go to the industrial one, there should be an architectural aesthetic reason to go beyond the 45 feet. Now we're creating a different level of criteria to build a bell tower, to build a whatever, I don't know, whatever, making this stuff up. So I'm just trying to show, otherwise, if we leave the standards, the same standards of special permit, we're gonna go for maximum application every time.
Why we set a maximum?
Height may increase
Or setback.
to 45 feet, subject to architectural design. I mean, I was trying to pull from what you were saying in 10
So-
words or less.
I mean,
I like the thought of setting a maximum height and just straight out maximum, this is it. If you're in the residential zone, it's 35 feet. If you're here, like you said, if they want to petition to change it, they can. Same with the industrial garden park. The maximum height now is 50, leave it at 50. But then just put additional criteria. Peaked roofs are preferred over flat roofs, whatever. And that way there, keeps it a little bit simpler. Hey, here's our maximum, like Connie said. People are gonna flip to the table, instead of having to look for bullets, mixed use, industrial garden park, 50 feet.
Because then the
what if we just
developer-
put down 50 feet with peaked roof?
Right.
Yeah,
It's right there.
that's, yeah.
Perfect.
I mean, if you want to,
And I think,
again,
I
you know,
think
try-
all of them should be,
Up to, maximum, up to 50, I'm just throwing the numbers
Yeah.
out again. 50 feet or 45, whatever number you want, with
Maximum.
peaked roof,
up to 50 feet.
with a peaked roof.
So
That was
I
an hour and a half.
propose
Yeah,
some-
oh, 2 seconds. Others. All right, Connor,
that sounds a little better, because before when it was just going on the max of 35, I was not in agreement with that. But what if we propose the maximum height of structures within a mixed-use village district shall reflect the surrounding zones and context where the district is to be created, not to exceed 50 feet with a peaked roof?
All zones, all areas? Or just the industrial garden park area?
Potentially all?
So that means you can have not to exceed 50 feet on Pease Road.
Well, the part that I understand that it's new and scary, but I also don't want to prevent us from never getting beyond 35 anywhere else in town, because that could eliminate a lot of neat possibilities for the town's future.
and
Because if we
detriment.
only ever allow what we've only
And-
ever
and-
done,
and-
we're
and
never
just-
moving
and
forward.
And Sid, you're right, feel free.
Go ahead, Sid.
And I'm experiencing it with friends and everything in other parts of the country, and detriment to the town too, because there are other parts of the country that are suffering, not necessarily from mixed use, but from zoning that's got so many loopholes that it's causing problems. So, my thought, it's a good point, Connor, I still feel we need the residential, the different areas in, the different zones, and for each one, have a maximum, and keep it at the maximum. I do like the fact peak roof 50 feet for the industrial garden. As far as the golf and residential zone, or especially the residential zone, I like 35 feet, peaked.
Keep it simple, make it the underlying zone.
But require peaked to make it look like a village type of.
So if I understand everyone correctly, under residential zones, maximum height would be 35 feet, period. Are we doing a peaked roof in the residential zone?
All right, can you build a 30, how
Yes.
tall of a building can you build 35 feet with
Brownstone
peak?
Gardens are 35-foot height.
And they have peak roof?
No, well, they have some sort of a little.
All right,
Yes,
so
they're
if-
not a flat roof.
Right, they're not a flat roof, right.
All
But
right.
35 feet, you can get 3 stories.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, because Summers Road has 3 stories.
Okay. And you can still, so with peak roof.
So maximum, so all residential zones, maximum height 35 feet.
With peak roof. Yeah,
But if-
go ahead.
Can you currently build in a residential zone 35 feet without a peaked roof?
Sure.
Sure.
So why would that, again, why would that be unacceptable in a mixed use then to have a 35-foot structure that doesn't have a peaked roof?
I think it's because of the high density and how close all the buildings are together to create this, whatever this idea of a village is in our minds.
It's to create the illusion more of a village.
Yeah.
And individual units rather than just one straight flat roof building that you put everything in.
Right.
Peaked roof's gonna go with the neighborhood.
There's a
Flat
building
roof.
off Converse Street in Long Meadow on there that an attorney built a flat roof building.
I know which one you're talking
And
about.
boy, does that stick out.
It's
Now, I mean, he
just-
got
yeah.
permission for it, but like, what the heck is this?
no turrets.
Yeah, that's the only thing missing, is, over there. So I think what we have to, look at is in terms of,
Started it.
we're building a high
your
density,
fault.
It's my fault.
high density project, all right? Close to each other, not the typical 1 acre, half acre piece. It's over here.
Spending hours.
And I think we're trying to create guidelines for what's us as the council through the planning board or visions of what is a village. What is, create some type of consistent design. If you're building a village, it's going to look like a village, not like a bunch of flat roofed apartment buildings throughout, in the middle of a residential, even if it's allowed. Because flat roof apartment buildings aren't, especially in high cluster like this, aren't allowed unless they do something through this.
Now, when we say peaked roof, would that include or exclude, like, having the facade of a roof on the side but not actually coming to a peak? Like, if you look at Birchland Park, for example, there's parts where
Which I am, right there.
the roof slopes, but it's actually a flat roof behind a good
I
part
was
of it.
actually looking at that picture while you were talking, before that. I think peak roof is a roof that serves the function of a roof more than just aesthetically, and you measure the highest peak, not just a facade of a roof for aesthetic purposes.
But it sounds
Connie?
like we're more concerned about aesthetics.
So
Yeah,
thinking
really.
like,
Yeah.
You are concerned
Concerned
about
about aesthetics
aesthetics.
and less of
Right.
the function of the roof.
I'm just putting the architect's hat on and I'm thinking of different roof lines and I'm thinking peaked roof. Well, what about the mansard roof? What about the hip roof? So you might, because so when you say peak,
Right.
you're limiting the architectural style and design that could be brought into the community. That might be enhancing. So perhaps we might say, under all residential zones, the highest horizontal line of a sloped roof, which is the roof ridge, is 35 feet. Again, so because you can get your ridge, you know,
Highest horizontal line of a sloped roof, what was the words after that, Connie?
the highest horizontal line of a sloped roof, which is the roof ridge.
Yes,
It's already addressed in our
you're,
bylaw.
you're already
Yeah.
top of the top, you're done.
Yeah, I know, but we're just, because again, if I'm a
I guess my
developer,
thought, Connie, is.
No, no rooftop bars.
This is a flat roof. This would be a sloped roof.
Yes.
That's not really what I'm looking,
you're
I'm
you're
looking
correct.
at. You know, maybe you come up on the sides, tilt a little bit, and then like that, I mean, that, rather than just like this, I'm
No,
saying.
what you're looking at is actually what Connor just said. You want a peak in the front that's, you know, at a peak, you know, 4 on 12, 6 on 12, 8 on 12. And what happens inside that, inside the bathtub that you don't see, who cares?
Rooftop bar.
With the exception of a rooftop bar.
With the exception of the rooftop bar.
Club.
And in all honesty, I think it's right. What we're designing for is what we can see, the visual. As long as it's functional after that, like I said, it's more important to me, even if, like you said, the facade of the building has a peak like this and then it's a flat roof in the back. When you look at it, you're gonna assume it's just a peaked roof building. I'm not good with wording, so
I think,
you guys compile the wording, I'll tell you what I think is.
Apparently, I'm not good with wording either.
no, you are, I mean, you made your intent, Marilyn, not, en contraire, I mean, you made your intent very clear. Your intent was to show that here's what you can apply for, 35 feet for residential. However, through a higher standard, and we just happen to use the word special permit, but maybe we have to just tighten it up, you can apply for something higher. So that was very clear, that there's a that we're telling the planning board, we're telling special permit granting authority that there should be a standard to apply for a higher number. And if we take away special permit, there is no second standard.
Through the chair.
No, I'm talking about the wording right here,
Oh,
special
okay.
permit is what I meant.
Okay.
Not take away special permit by any stretch of
No,
the
no,
process.
I'm just trying to clarify.
Yeah.
What have we come up with to this point?
What we've
We're
come
doing
up
a
with the point,
maximum.
height, what's on the table for discussion, and that's what we're bantering about, is to have a maximum height not to exceed 45 feet for residential, not to exceed 45 feet for commercial, not to exceed 45 feet for golf, not to exceed 50 feet for industrial.
Okay. When I
That's what's
spoke-
on the table.
Yeah.
No, no, no,
We're not,
if I
we're
can
not there
clarify-
yet.
If I can
So-
clarify, my thought was we were gonna have the maximum as what Maryland had for each zone here.
the smaller of the
Residential,
numbers.
Yes, the smaller of the number. Maximum 35 for residential zones, that's 3 stories.
Or what about industrial and industrial garden?
Well, it's currently at 45 feet. I thought that was the discussion we were having. Should it go to 50 feet for industrial and industrial garden? Marilyn, what's your thought?
My thought was what I wrote.
Okay, so you like 45 feet?
No, I like the ability to be flexible within the project with, the requirement is 45 feet for a mixed-use village district in a industrial or industrial garden park zone, which was previous to the creation of the village. The increase to the additional 5 feet would be based on documentation, justification, have a discussion. You know, the height requirement is 45 feet, we would like to increase to 50 feet because we're gonna do these roof lines, or we want to be sensitive to the residential neighbors next door. That was my thinking for, you know, for
Exactly, and
flexibility.
I think we need to kind of find a way, in a simple way, where we had that before the word special permit, is the way to give that direction. So it could be something as this, is 45 feet, however, the we will consider, the planning board will consider up to 50 feet if petitioner demonstrates justification for design. In other words, the practical level is they're not going to be building anything higher. It's going to be more, yeah, go ahead.
For industrial garden zone only. We're not talking about the other three zones?
No, we can't really do that because
Because to
that's.
me, we need to set a maximum, or we're just, as you said, I would go for the maximum all the time, even if I wasn't planning on building the maximum, just to have that
Right,
luxury.
just have that
So,
product.
through the chair.
Yeah.
I would suggest, like Sid did, the 35, the 40, the 50 feet for industrial garden park, up to that. Not, there's a maximum of that, up to that. That way there, if they decide lower or whatever, it's more inviting. And then look for wordage that says, with the appearance of peaked roofs, or something on that idea, to where you gotta have it look like there's a peak to the roof and not just flat roof. And that way there, it gives them the maximum height. And like you said earlier, if someone wants to build one in a residential zone, they can always come back and look to amend the bylaw to allow a different height in the future. That's down the road in the future. I mean, that may never happen.
My thought is we're setting the rules now. If we set the rules, everybody knows what to play by.
Mhm. So, but also we want to set the rules to give incentive for better architectural design to
Correct.
create an image of of the village image.
Right.
Okay? Similar to what, Center Square did. They came in with kind of an image to try to create this harmony between municipal buildings and private buildings
And a speedway.
and a speedway. Okay.
So.
All right, so do we want to wrap up right now with that and come back to see if we can come up with some tighter language as far as creating a or do we simply want to, this is too important just to kind of brush over. I think we need to look at, do we want to just simply say the maximum height is this, end of the discussion? And if they want to go beyond it, come back and modify which means we're just going to have to
So-
revisit this in the future?
Through the chair, I tend to agree, I tend to feel that will be the simplest thing and the safest thing to do.
The first paragraph, the first sentence says the maximum height of structures within a mixed-use village district shall reflect the zone and surrounding context where the district is to be created. Bingo. So then we know all residential zones, maximum height, 35 feet.
Bingo, that's it.
Right, and then 40 feet for commercial business, 35 for golf recreational, which has an underlying zone of residential
Anyway, yeah.
and industrial and industrial garden park, maximum 50. So what we've accomplished from this, which was, if that's the way we go, it was always 50, but it wasn't, the plan of it to be 50 in the other
No,
zones, we
you
needed to talk
tremendously,
about that.
you tremendously
Right.
protected your residential
Exactly.
neighborhoods.
Right.
This committee just tremendously protected your residential neighborhoods.
Well, that's the goal.
I think that's what we vote on today, that
Right.
that's agreeable, and then we look to adjust language to put in the roof line.
What?
That's what I
the
want in
last-
there, I want the roof line language in there. I like the word Maryland put together, flat roof lines are to be discouraged.
I added, which we hadn't talked about yet, which is not in keeping with New England architecture. That was something that Miss Connie said, so I
New
just.
England architecture?
New
Okay.
England architecture, so that was just but that's feel-good stuff, that's not any real
All right, so-
directive, it's just a suggestion.
Flat roofs prohibited.
But can we do that?
I don't know.
Because there may be an area within a development, and that a flat roof might be appropriate, but not necessarily the tallest piece.
You don't want to prohibit
Right.
the bathtub.
Okay.
Right,
You want,
You want to hide the bathtub.
You want to hide the bathtub.
right.
And you want to hide the bathtub with a pitched roof with some pitch.
I mean, I don't wanna see
Yeah.
jagged on roofs.
So,
Okay. So
And any,
who's not-
and any subsequent developer who has to come back and visit, or, you know, revisit the zoning, they have to sit through a minimum of 10 planning subcommittee meetings.
And this is 50 feet, right?
At least.
Yeah, we had 40, and now
Right.
they've
We're at
increased.
26 now, aren't we?
Right, right,
So
right.
this is gonna be 50.
I think that's
Okay.
4.8.
Yeah.
Now,
Those are the first two
the-
pages.
Yeah.
does the committee feel that, you know, we had original language as part of 4.4 about a 4-story residential limit and a 3-story mixed-use limit?
I think if we set the heights, then the number of stories and all, especially when you throw in the visual of a pitched roof, will take care of itself.
Well, that's what I thought.
Yes.
But I don't want to create, I didn't want to eliminate that without asking for, okay, so that's out. Okay.
How about, again, you don't have to just say no pitched roof, but in order to have the maximum height of 40 feet, of 35 feet, of 50 feet, those maximum height buildings must have a pitched roof. You can always build a flat roof, 20-foot building for whatever reason.
How about a 49-foot building with a flat roof then?
Well, so we got you here, you're thinking, I like how you think.
I mean,
No, I mean, in order to get, I'm just trying to find a way to keep with the language, flat roof lines are to be discouraged. That being said, what language can we encourage, you know?
Well, we said it. I mean, diverse roof heights are encouraged and should complement the surrounding developed environment. I mean, there's a design review that will take place in this process, and there will be public hearings, and we can all sit in the audience, and if we see all these flat roofs, we can complain.
Yes.
how about diverse roof styles and heights are encouraged?
Roof
That works.
and heights are encouraged.
Don, question?
Through the
Yes,
chair,
Joe.
I would suggest that you should have it in the language of a mixed-use village, that in the spirit or in the context of creating a mixed-use village, that it's the roofs are encouraged in this way. And the design grow from there, for design standards.
That would allow us to take it out of this.
Is there a, Connie, is there, through the planning guides and so forth, kind of a helpful definition of New England design?
No,
No,
no, there isn't,
just a thought.
yeah.
Why
I-
reinvent the,
Which you could, I mean,
sort of in the preamble of it, is that a village, defining a village as a new, in keeping with New England design or suburban New England, I don't know, I'm just trying to come up with something that let people know we don't want sort of an
Under general
urbanized,
description
Yeah.
yeah,
for
an
a mixed-use
urbanized
village.
facility you would see in big
The purpose of
cities.
creating-
yeah, I'm just, for instance, my friends in Marshfield have the Village of Grant Rock, has a historical development pattern that contains both commercial and residential uses, blah, blah. They ask that that provided such buildings be designed and constructed in a manner that preserves and respects the historic New England architecture. So, you know, I think if you all came into a New England, you'd say, oh yeah, I get that,
Yeah,
right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's sort of, and.
I develop all over the country, I know what New England is.
So that you can incorporate that, which should
Is
solve the
that
roof
a
problem.
left-handed compliment?
No, it is. I know what it is.
So,
And when I'm in New Jersey and someone tells me Seashore Colonial, I know what that means. When I'm in California and someone tells me Southwestern Motif, I know what that means.
yeah, it's just the local flavor.
It is.
It's indigenous, we call it indigenous architecture.
In the spirit of creating a mixed-use village, heights of new buildings shall approximate those of adjacent and existing buildings. Diverse roof styles and heights are encouraged and should complement the surrounding developed environment. Flat roof lines are to be discouraged, which is not in keeping with New England architecture. And that's a statement. I mean, it says what it says, it's not.
you want to say a little, one more time?
Okay. And and this is thanks to you, Joe, for that comment. In the spirit of creating a mixed-use village, heights of new buildings shall approximate those of adjacent and existing buildings. Diverse roof styles and heights are encouraged and should complement the surrounding developed environment. Flat roof lines are to be discouraged, which is not in keeping with New England architecture. Whatever that
That's
is.
your
What are your thoughts, Connor?
That's our
So where would that go?
It'd go to right here. This would be, she reworded this. She added a
So it
preamble,
would
further
still be part
preamble.
of 4.4, or would that get moved?
That would, I
No,
plan to
maybe.
put it with 4.4, where
Yeah,
the,
it would still
because
be
we're
4.
talking heights, we're talking roofs, that's where it needs to be.
We also have a section, development regulations for mixed-use village district, that could probably fit right into.
I thought about moving, actually, I thought about moving the whole piece there, but I wasn't sure.
And that way there, the heights can stay in 4.4, they'll be in the table.
Mhm.
And then under the development regulations for the mixed-use village,
Put this piece.
the information as far as the roof lines and all can
So
go.
what section would you put
Where
that
is
in?
that on?
Please move this
I've got it
forward.
on page 7 of 7.
It's the last section. It's actually, it's now,
Or 11,
it's
it's
new 11.
11.
Development regulations for mixed-use village.
Right here.
And it's gonna be complementary to nearby buildings, consistent with the zoning bylaws, provide for quality development, and have it as one of the points in there.
So we'll just leave it at the, just add it to the bottom, rather than fit, unless you want to fit it in the middle. I mean, the location, does it matter?
I don't think the location really matters.
Okay.
Yeah, because it is consistent with the height.
Well, actually, it's starting with letter A. The mixed-use village development will be complementary to nearby buildings and structures. Maybe we could just add that piece there.
I still
Yeah.
would like to keep it. If we do add that piece, then I
Keep
would
it as
say,
another-
See.
as further defined in section 11A. I don't want to lose that connection to it in 4.4. Whether the verbiage, if we want to make it further stated in 11A, but don't, in my opinion, lose it as part of 4.4, reference it specifically.
Got it.
This was a very productive meeting, really, when you think about it. This is important stuff.
It's almost like I created a whole new meeting just by myself.
Thank you, appreciate that. I'm
So
sure they
just
don't.
Sorry,
just so that I know before I go back to the computer.
Right.
So residential zones, maximum height 35, commercial business 40, golf recreational 35, industrial garden park 50, and then the section about, in the spirit of creating a mixed-use village, that information will be moved to section 11 and above, the first sentence, it says as, and we'll say C, or as further designed or defined.
Yeah, the height, such height requirements are as the following.
Right.
Or it should be, or as follows, not
Right,
as the
and then,
following.
and then C.
Should be followed, as further defined in.
In 11A.
11A,
Right, okay,
yeah.
okay. Got it, thank you.
All right, what I'm gonna do is, to wrap up the meeting, I would like to schedule another meeting, and at this point, I'm gonna keep everybody in the loop. I've already had preliminary conversation with the town manager and council president about we desperately need a clerk, because our clerk was on part of a program with the, our minute keeper with a program through the Board of Assessors that expired, his position expired December 31st. So I'm gonna be talking to the Board of Assessors, to the Assessors Department to see what other qualified candidates we have to take that spot. Otherwise, we desperately need someone from either the planning board, planning board too, or the clerk's office to have at least for the short term, a clerk to take these very important minutes. Paula, I have to give him so much credit, but he is no longer he's no longer part of the program as of January 1. And so we need to address that. So I will keep you in the loop. Hopefully we'll have a meeting early February and we can really wrap these up. And I'm also in the process of, I've talked to the council president, I've also talked to the town manager about having a specific council attorney who is an expert on this subject to review the bylaws to make sure that that this proposal is consistent both with the law as well as consistent with making sure it's not creating any type of unintentional spot zone. And I've also reached out to a person to come in for an RFP through all that process. Marilyn?
I'd also like to add that administrative work is not my forte, and I have taken on the responsibility of handling the document in my computer and making the changes. And it's, for some reason, I've had some difficulty with getting in and out of red font, black font, the whole 9 yards. The information's all still there, but when it comes to putting this document in pristine form to go before the council, I'm
No,
gonna
that-
need
yeah,
some help with
absolutely.
that.
That's where I'm
You know,
drawing- that's where I'm drawing the
I'm
hard-
happy to do the work, I spend a
That's where
lot
I'm
of
drawing
time
the
on
hard
it.
line at this point. We desperately need somebody.
Well,
Connie?
that, through the chair, you can send us the document and we will format the document for town council. But as far as minutes go, my suggestion is that, and we've talked at great length,
Yeah.
Perhaps the town council might be interested in bringing on a stenographer who can serve the different.
See, we don't really
words.
need verbatim words on here.
Oh, no,
That's
no,
all.
no.
We just
Yeah,
need
yeah, yeah.
somebody who, like Paul, who just stepped into the position, and Tracy before him.
Right,
is-
just there are verbatim minutes and there are minutes that are synopsis of the meeting.
Which is what if we vote on.
Right, so when you hire a stenographer, they're not transcribing verbatim either, they're summarizing, and that is an art. You have, and I work with my current staff to encourage her in how to summarize the events. And it's taken a year and we're still not summarizing as succinctly as I would like to see
Right.
the minutes summarized. But when you have someone who's trained in transcribing minutes, they know how to do this. And you can, $100 a meeting, that's generally the ballpark. I've had them in different communities where I've worked.
Okay.
You can also offer to hire staff amongst the employees, depending on what the union says though, to come in because it's extra. And do this on top of their work, but then you get into the compensation of overtime, so it doesn't necessarily work in this community. But I think moving forward, because there are several boards that could benefit by having a staff minute taker on, or, a contracted consultant, and plan accordingly, because it provides an arm's length, and it removes the perceived conflict of interest or slanting of the minutes, because you have that individual who comes in, and again, they're trained, they know how to take minutes, and they're factual, not emotion, there's no
Well,
ethos.
it's gonna be a function of the budget and which budget it comes out of, and also the question is is the person gonna be an independent contractor for the town, and we're gonna be dealing with all that kind of stuff.
Honestly, it goes to the town manager. She's in
Yeah.
charge
Yeah,
of
I'm-
employees and.
I mentioned to Mary when I talked to her, and I talked to Kathy, and this is a super high priority for us. We gotta have this done. We're wrapping up other things, just some other, as we're now in 2020, so we can just kind of have our end game to get this stuff, we gotta deal with this. We're also gonna deal with where we're gonna put the host community agreement in this agreement.
I thought we
Okay.
referenced it, but,
I know, but we wanna
We'll look at-
firm that up.
Right.
Any other hot bullet points?
well, we have to discuss frontage.
Right.
And we also have to do live workspace.
Oh, that's right.
We needed a definition, if we decide that it's yes or no. And depending on if it's yes or no, the information that was submitted to us with live workspace also requires some criteria. And I don't know how involved we should be in going into that. I mean, it was put on the table of uses from the planning board, but without understanding what it means, we said definition, and then as I went through the information that was submitted, there were certain criteria with the use of the space between the commercial space and the residential space within the unit, and this happened to be a sampling from one community. So what's the best fit for East Long Meadow? And I don't have the answer
No,
for
I don't,
that.
that's, Connor.
We also have the language that we haven't talked about for inclusionary housing with the. I don't think
we got
got
the
a sample back,
right,
but we never
right.
put anything together.
I put something together, which I was gonna
Oh.
give, but I didn't get there, so, we gotta keep working on this stuff, so,
And then-
Like I said,
that's why, and it's not that I'm putting it together because I am in charge of this, it's just that if I'm doing it and I'm reviewing it, I'm making examples as you did today with the things that you wanted.
No, first of all, I want to applaud you for doing what you did. I mean, I got it clear, I think you spoke with what the council, I mean, the subcommittee is all about, what we're, and I think with this led to some very productive discussion. And-
Absolutely.
And hopefully, when my summaries of what you said I think I understood what you were saying. There's a standard and there's another standard. And I think the byproduct now with the core that you put together it was good in the start, and I think it collectively even got better.
Thank you.
Bravo. Thank you.
We're a team.
We are.
Going forwards down, we have those 4 bullet points, the host community agreement, frontage,
Frontage.
workspace, and language for inclusionary housing
Right.
that we will be discussing at the next meeting.
We'll try.
Right.
And I'll keep you guys posted. I will contact the Developers Council as well as when this next meeting is, and my high priority is trying to see if we can have a.
Can we tentatively set
clerk.
it now?
We could-
At the next meeting, will we also be voting on this language we just discussed today?
Yes.
We should.
Right. What I'm going to do with that is clean up the document and send it all, and I'll send it to you folks as well.
Have we been attempting every other Monday?
Well, you're gonna be gone in 2 weeks.
I'm gone in 2 weeks, but
You're
just.
gone in 2 weeks?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I would
And
say.
how long are you gone for?
10 days. So I think, I'm literally back to work on the 27th, so I have a feeling my paralegal's not gonna make that a pleasant event.
So,
February 3rd is an open day for me, it's a Monday.
before we go that far, what about next week, the 13th?
Stay
No?
stay tuned.
I can do that.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Stay-
I mean, I'm trying not to lose
Yeah.
momentum.
No, I don't wanna lose momentum
Right.
either, but I also don't wanna have too many meetings with no clerk. And that's important. I mean, this was a very important stuff right here.
Well, is anyone here willing
Through
to
the
take
chair,
minutes?
through the chair, I, M&M typically would never go to a meeting without a stenographer. Okay, I make it a personal and professional thing that I, no. I think I'm committing planning malpractice when I don't have a stenographer with me. Okay, I haven't brought them here because, local
Yeah.
custom, it's not the local custom,
Yeah.
you know?
Now, what normally, like I said,
So-
you've been here for a lot of meetings, all right? In the very beginning, the onset was we had a clerk.
Right.
And then when that clerk left the planning board, the new, replacement clerk, it didn't work out because of the contract that person has. So, and then we were in transition with the clerk's office where I
Oh, no,
tried to
I-
get the
no, I
existing.
understand. I just-
And then we fortunately, through this program where they allow seniors to work off some of their
Mm-hmm.
tax bill, we happened to find somebody that stepped in and did a pretty good
Right.
job, as you can
Right,
see.
so what I'd like to suggest, or ask, really, not suggest, is I would like to bring a stenographer, and in communities, when I have a stenographer, the board will say, well, our record is official, okay. And then, and they say, as a courtesy, would you give us a copy? So,
Well, let's.
I would like to suggest, we will bring a stenographer for our purpose, and we'll provide you with a copy of the transcript.
All right, well.
And y'all can do with it
Let me just
whatever
run
you
that through as you being a planning board person yourself.
I just whispered in his ear a little bit differently.
Thought so.
Right.
Yeah.
Or we help you fund one.
Or
your
whatever,
choice.
and we make a contribution, Howard,
We
we're
make-
happy
we'll make a
to,
contribution
we're happy to
for-
be the solution
We'll try to.
in a
okay,
way
let's-
that's efficient.
We'll, and that's, 'cause we appreciate that. Let me just make sure we do it the right way.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, just gotta make sure it's the right way. We know it's on the table, so if we can get somebody and
And we'll fund
let's
it.
just make sure, I assure you, I'm gonna have this conversation with our town manager, our town clerk's office, assessors, and just to make sure, and probably town council, just to make sure we do things that aren't gonna be perceived in a way that no good deed goes unpunished.
Right.
So
The
we'll
town
do that.
selection person that they pick,
Yeah.
we'll fund it.
Yeah, so I'm not thinking by next Monday, we're gonna have that answer that quickly.
Well, I'm saying, if we meet next Monday, I'm willing to have a stenographer sitting here
right.
doing her thing.
Well, hopefully I'll have answers,
For
and
his thing.
hopefully I'll have some sense of direction if the people get back to me in a timely fashion. Because we have to post it for next Monday, would have to be by Thursday at the latest. So just stay tuned, I'm on it.
Thursday by 10 a.m.
But if I don't feel, but I need a lot of okays from people to make sure it happens. We may have a retired stenographer in our pool of talent
Right.
for the current senior batch for tax abatement, okay? We may luck out. So I won't know until I have this conversation.
So we'll plan on Monday. I'll be optimistic. We'll plan on Monday.
You do whatever you
And
want.
Tentatively Monday.
Tentatively Monday, and tentatively, we'll have a stenographer with us, for my purposes, for our purposes.
Okay.
And just make sure I don't have any inherent conflicts on that day. It's 2 days before I leave, so.
So the 13th from 10:30 to 12:30?
I've not scheduled that meeting yet.
Tentatively.
Tentatively,
I
yes.
did not schedule that meeting yet.
And
Okay.
I just sent an email to Diane Bishop asking when the swaps start up again. So. if
I will
you're-
be seeing Diane, I'll be making the rounds at Town Hall, and hopefully I'll get some answers. All righty.
So you don't want me to reserve the room?
I'm not doing anything, if you want to, and it's not gonna prejudice whoever was here. These guys graciously moved their holiday party one day because of this meeting today.
We'll have cake and
So they were very, I have to
We can
applaud
save
them.
the party.
No, tomorrow. You have to come back tomorrow at this time.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they did that.
I would
So-
suggest we at least look to see if the room's.
Let's just put a tentative pencil mark hold on it,
Put a
but
hold
like I
on it.
said, I need to have a clerk.
And I believe
desperately.
Connor was about to make a motion.
I
Connor,
move that we adjourn.
and
I'll second that.
motion made, second, any
Thank you
discussion?
for your
Hearing none,
time.
all in favor?
Thank you.
Aye. See you.